Can I hide here? They're coming. Luna gasped, practically throwing herself against the heavy oak door as it swung inward. Rain, cold and relentless, plastered her hair to her pale face, her chest heaving with desperate, jagged breaths. The man inside didn't flinch. He stood before the fireplace, broad shoulders silhouetted against the dying embers, a crystal tumbler in one hand. He slowly turned, his gaze sharp, calculating, and an unsettling shade of amber, locking onto her. "Please," she whispered. The sound of boots splashing in the alleyway outside, growing closer. "Just for a minute." He took a slow sip of his drink. "You," he said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that vibrated through the floorboards, "have chosen a very dangerous place to hide." The scent in the room hit Luna before the fear truly settled back in. It wasn't the stale cigar smoke and spilled ale she expected from a tavern's back room in this part of the city. It smelled of old pine, ozone, and something feral, like a storm about to break. The man stepped out of the shadows. He was imposing, standing well over 6 feet, clad in a perfectly tailored dark suit that seemed completely incongruous with the rough-hewn surroundings. His face was all hard angles and shadows, beautiful in a brutal, uncompromising way. "Who is they?" he asked, not moving toward her, yet somehow commanding the entire space between them. Luna swallowed hard, her hand still gripping the brass doorknob behind her. "Men," she managed, her voice trembling despite her efforts to steady it. "The Silver Creek gang. I saw something I shouldn't have." A muscle ticked in his jaw. The name meant something to him, though his expression remained a mask of cool indifference. "And you thought bursting into my private study was the solution?" The door was unlocked, she pointed out, defensive now. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind an ache in her ribs, where she'd fallen 2 streets over. It was the only one. He set his tumbler down on a mahogany desk with a soft clink. "Nothing in this territory is unlocked by accident, little bird." Before she could process the strange nickname or the ominous weight of his words, the heavy thud of a fist hammered against the door behind her. Luna jumped, a strangled cry escaping her lips. "Open up!" a gruff voice yelled from the street. "We know she came down this alley." Panic seized her. She looked around wildly, finding no second exit, no closet to dive into. The room was sparse, the desk, a leather armchair, and the fireplace. She looked back at the man, a silent, desperate plea in her wide brown eyes. He didn't move to help her. He simply watched her, his amber eyes missing nothing, not the mud on her cheap sneakers, not the tear in her jacket, not the terrified tremor in her hands. He was weighing her, evaluating her worth against the trouble she brought. "Please," she breathed again, stepping away from the door as another heavy blow rattled it in its frame. "If I let them in," he mused, his tone conversational, almost bored, "they will tear this room apart. I am very fond of that desk." He finally moved, crossing the distance between them with a grace that belied his size. He didn't make a sound as he walked. He reached past her, his arm brushing her shoulder, and slid a heavy deadbolt into place with a definitive snap. The knocking stopped, replaced by muttered curses outside. "She ain't here," someone growled. "Let's check the old mill." Their footsteps receded, the sound swallowed by the heavy rain. Luna slumped against the wall, her legs giving out, sliding down until she hit the floorboards. She pulled her knees to her chest, burying her face in her arms as a shuddering breath left her. "Get up," the man said. It wasn't a request. Luna raised her head, blinking away the stinging tears she refused to shed. He was standing over her, holding out a clean, white linen handkerchief. She hesitated, then took it. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said, turning back toward the fireplace. He added a log, the flames flaring up, casting dancing shadows across his features. "You have brought Silver Creek dogs to my doorstep. That requires an explanation." Luna wiped her face, the mud and rain leaving dark streaks on the pristine cloth. She felt ridiculously small sitting on the floor while he loomed nearby. She forced herself to stand, her wet clothes clinging uncomfortably to her skin. "My name is Luna," she started, trying to inject some dignity into her stance. "I didn't ask for your name," he interrupted, turning to face her again. "Names are liabilities. I asked what you saw. They were exchanging something," she said, choosing her words carefully. "Down by the docks, heavy crates. And there was a man. They forced him into a car." The man's amber eyes narrowed fractionally. "What kind of crates?" "Wooden, stamped with a crescent moon." A heavy silence descended on the room, thicker than the tension before. The feral scent grew stronger, almost suffocating. The man closed his eyes for a brief second, a low sound escaping his chest, something between a sigh and a growl. When he opened his eyes, the amber seemed to glow. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Luna," he said, finally using her name, though it sounded strange on his tongue. "I just want to go home," she said, her voice small. "You can't," he stated matter-of-factly. "If they saw you see the crates, you are already dead. You just haven't stopped breathing yet." Luna felt the blood drain from her face. "But I got away. Silver Creek does not let loose ends walk away," he told her, stepping closer. "They will find you. They will find your family, your friends." "I don't have any," she blurted out, the painful truth slipping past her defenses before she could stop it. Something flickered in his expression, surprise perhaps, or something akin to pity, though it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Then you have nothing to lose," he said softly. He reached out, his large hand wrapping around her upper arm. His touch was burning hot through her damp jacket. He pulled her toward a section of the oak-paneled wall that looked solid. He pressed a hidden catch, and a section of the wall swung silently open, revealing a dimly lit stone staircase leading down into the darkness. "Where are we going?" she asked, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Underground," he replied, his grip firm but not painful as he guided her toward the stairs. "You needed a place to hide. This is it." "But who are you?" she asked, pulling back slightly. He paused on the first step, looking back at her. The shadows half covered his face, making him look less human, more like a creature born of the night itself. "My name is David," he said, the low rumble of his voice echoing in the stone stairwell. "And you, Luna, have just walked into a war." The air in the hidden stairwell grew sharply colder the deeper they descended, smelling of damp earth and ancient stone. Luna's wet sneakers squelched softly against the steps, each sound magnified in the tight, claustrophobic space. She kept her hand trailing along the rough-hewn wall to steady herself, her breath coming in shallow, ragged puffs. Ahead of her, David moved with a liquid silence that defied logic. A man of his broad, imposing stature should have made the wooden planks and stone steps groan beneath his weight, yet he was entirely noiseless. "What war?" Luna whispered, the question finally tearing through the thick veil of her fear. "I just saw some crates. I'm nobody." Silver Creek wouldn't start a war over a nobody. David did not break his stride, nor did he look back. "Silver Creek," he said, his voice echoing softly, a resonant baritone that sent a strange, involuntary shiver down her spine. Does not operate on the logic of ordinary men. They operate on greed, and recently on a very dangerous strain of ambition. Those crates you saw, they weren't meant for this side of the city. They weren't meant for my territory. The phrasing was odd, archaic even, but Luna's exhausted mind couldn't fully process it. She winced, a sharp spike of pain radiating from her ribs as she misjudged the height of a step. A tiny, muffled gasp escaped her lips. Instantly, David stopped. He turned, the meager light from a single caged bulb overhead, catching the golden amber of his eyes. He didn't ask if she was all right. He simply stepped up to the stair just below hers, closing the distance between them. The sudden proximity was overwhelming. The feral ozone and pine scent of him completely masked the smell of the damp earth. "You're injured," he stated. It wasn't a question. "I fell," she murmured, instinctively crossing her arms over her chest defensively. "In the alley, before I found your study. It's just bruised." David's gaze dropped to her midsection, his eyes narrowing fractionally. For a fleeting second, Luna could have sworn the ambient temperature around them spiked. "Bruised, perhaps, but breathing is costing you effort. Keep your hand on the wall. We're almost there." He turned back around, but his pace slowed significantly, matching her halting steps. It was a small, almost imperceptible courtesy, but it struck Luna deeply. In her world, a world of scraping by on double shifts at the diner, keeping her head down, and avoiding the vicious street gangs that ruled the lower districts. No one slowed down for anyone. The ancient stone steps abruptly gave way to a modern, polished concrete floor. The transition was so jarring that Luna stumbled. At the end of a short corridor stood a heavy steel door, devoid of any handle or keyhole. A small biometric scanner glowed a faint, clinical blue on the wall beside it. David pressed his palm against the glass. The machine beeped, a soft, mechanical chime, and the heavy steel door hissed open on pneumatic hinges. "Inside," he commanded gently, stepping aside to let her pass. Luna hesitated. Walking into a hidden basement was one thing. Walking into a high-tech subterranean vault with a strange, intimidating man was another. But the memory of the heavy fists pounding on the oak door above propelled her forward. She stepped over the threshold, and her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't a bunker. It was a sprawling, subterranean sanctuary that looked like the penthouse of a luxury hotel. Rich, dark hardwood floors stretched out beneath recessed lighting that perfectly mimicked the warm glow of late afternoon sun. A massive leather sectional dominated the center of the room, facing a sleek, modern fireplace where real flames danced over ceramic logs. Walls of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the perimeter, interspersed with abstract art and display cases holding ancient, unidentifiable artifacts. "This is..." Luna trailed off, completely at a loss for words. Her cheap, rain-soaked clothes dripped muddy water onto an antique Persian rug. She looked down, horrified. "I'm ruining your carpet." "The rug can be replaced," David said, stepping inside as the heavy steel door hissed shut behind them, sealing them in absolute, terrifying quiet. "A life cannot. Take your jacket off, Luna. You're freezing." She shivered, realizing for the first time how deeply the cold had seeped into her bones. She peeled the ruined, muddy denim jacket off her shoulders, her hands trembling violently. David walked toward a set of closed double doors at the far end of the room. "There is a bathroom through there," he instructed, his tone polite but brokering no argument. You will find a shower, clean towels, and robes in the cabinet. Wash the street off you. I need to make a call." Luna clutched her damp shirt. "Are you calling the police?" David paused, his hand resting on the back of the leather sofa. He looked at her, his expression a complex tapestry of amusement and deep, ancient weariness. "The police do not police Silver Creek, Luna. And they certainly do not police me. Go. Lock the door if it makes you feel safer. But know that nothing in this world can harm you while you are in my house." The absolute certainty in his voice was both terrifying and deeply comforting. Luna nodded once, clutching her ribs, and walked toward the bathroom, feeling the amber weight of his gaze on her back until she closed the door. The hot water of the shower felt like a baptism. Luna stood under the rainfall showerhead for what felt like hours, letting the scalding streams wash away the mud, the cold, and the lingering terror of the alleyway. The bathroom itself was an exercise in extreme opulence. Black marble, brushed gold fixtures, and an array of expensive, heavily scented soaps. She scrubbed her skin until it was pink, trying to erase the phantom feeling of the Silver Creek enforcers breathing down her neck. When she finally turned off the water, the silence of the underground suite rushed back in. It was absolute. Not a single vibration of the city above penetrated the thick, fortified ceiling. She found a thick, charcoal gray cotton robe folded neatly in the glass cabinet. It was easily twice her size, clearly belonging to David, swallowing her small frame entirely. She rolled up the sleeves, the soft fabric smelling faintly of that same intoxicating pine and ozone scent. Taking a deep breath, she unlocked the door and stepped back out into the main living area. David was not on the phone. He was standing by the fireplace, an open medical kit resting on the glass coffee table before him. He had shed his suit jacket and unbuttoned the top 2 buttons of his crisp white shirt. The informal look somehow made him appear even more dangerous. A predator resting between hunts. "Come here," he said, his voice softer now. Less of a command and more of a request. Luna crossed the room tentatively, her bare feet sinking into the plush rug. "I'm fine, really," she lied, her hand instinctively hovering over her ribs. "Logic dictates otherwise," David replied calmly. "You are favoring your left side, your breathing is shallow, and your pulse rate is elevated despite the hot shower. Sit." He pointed to the edge of the leather sofa. Luna, too exhausted to argue, complied. She sat rigidly as David knelt on the floor in front of her. The sheer size of the man was overwhelming when he was this close. He didn't ask permission, but his movements were incredibly slow, broadcasting his intent so as not to startle her. He reached out and gently parted the lapels of the oversized robe just enough to expose her left side over her ribs. Luna sucked in a sharp breath. Not from pain, but from the sudden, searing heat of his fingertips brushing her skin. His touch was impossibly warm, like a stone left in the summer sun. "Hold still," he murmured, his amber eyes intensely focused on the dark, blooming purple bruise spreading across her lower ribcage. He pressed his fingers against her skin, moving with clinical precision. Luna bit her lip to keep from crying out, but a small whimper escaped anyway. David's jaw tightened. 2 bruised ribs, he diagnosed quietly. "Nothing broken. You are fortunate. A fraction of an inch higher and the impact would have fractured the bone." "I hit a dumpster trying to jump a fence," she admitted, looking down at his large hands. They were elegant but scarred. Faint, silvery lines crisscrossing his knuckles and the back of his wrists. "Who are you, David?" "Truly. You have a fortress under an old tavern. You know about street gangs. And you don't look like a doctor. He withdrew his hands, though the heat of his touch lingered on her skin. He reached into the medical kit and pulled out a jar of translucent, herbal-smelling salve. I am a man who prefers order in his city, David answered smoothly, unscrewing the lid. And Silver Creek represents chaos. Apply this to the bruise. It will expedite the healing process. He handed her the jar, deliberately avoiding answering her question. Luna took it, applying the cool ointment beneath the robe. As she did, her eyes wandered to the coffee table. Beneath the medical kit rested a heavy, leather-bound ledger. The cover was worn, but embossed in the center of the leather was a symbol. A crescent moon, identical to the ones she had seen stamped on the wooden crates at the docks. But this one was pierced by a single, jagged sword. Her breath hitched. "The crates," she whispered, pointing a trembling finger at the ledger. "That's the symbol. The moon." David's gaze snapped from her face to the book. For a fraction of a second, an expression of pure, unadulterated fury crossed his features, so primal and terrifying that Luna pressed herself back into the cushions. But just as quickly, the mask of cool indifference slipped back into place. "A coincidence," he said, though his voice had dropped an octave, vibrating with suppressed tension. "You're lying," Luna challenged, surprising herself with her own audacity. "You asked me specifically what kind of crates they were. You knew. Are you working with them?" David stood up, his massive frame casting a long shadow over her. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, thick with an unseen pressure that made Luna's ears pop. "I do not work with scavengers, Luna," he said, each word perfectly enunciated, carrying the weight of a judge passing a death sentence. "I hunt them. The men you saw at the docks were stealing something that belongs to my family. Something incredibly dangerous if opened by human hands." "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. David looked down at her, the amber in his eyes glowing in the firelight. The silence stretched between them, heavy with secrets he was not ready to share. He looked at her fragile, bruised form wrapped in his clothes, a profound conflict warring in his expression. "It is a weapon," he finally answered softly. "Designed to kill my kind." "Your kind," Luna echoed, the words barely a whisper over the crackling of the ceramic logs in the fireplace. She pulled the oversized charcoal robe tighter around her small frame, trying to apply logic to a situation that defied it. "You mean your family? A syndicate? A cartel?" David did not immediately answer. He closed the heavy medical kit with a soft, decisive click, his amber eyes catching the firelight. He looked at her, his expression unreadable, calculating how much truth she could bear. "A lineage," he corrected gently, his resonant voice filling the quiet space. "One that has overseen this city since before its roads were paved with asphalt. Silver Creek is a new disease, a collection of opportunistic scavengers who believe that violence can usurp history. They are mistaken." Luna watched him as he stood, carrying the medical kit away to a discreet cabinet integrated into the bookshelves. She tried to piece together the puzzle of the man before her. He spoke with the refined, polite cadence of a scholar. Yet he possessed the physical presence of a heavyweight fighter. His wealth was obvious, hidden beneath the city's grime. Yet he didn't flaunt it with the arrogant swagger of the crime bosses she sometimes saw dining in the VIP section of the restaurant where she worked. "If they are just scavengers," Luna asked, her logical mind working past the throbbing ache in her ribs, "why are they stealing weapons to use against you? Why not just fight you for territory?" David paused. He turned his head, a slow, appreciative smile touching the corners of his mouth. It completely transformed his face, softening the harsh, brutal angles into something breathtakingly handsome. You possess a sharp mind, Luna. It is a rare and valuable commodity. He walked toward a sleek kitchenette hidden behind a sliding partition of frosted glass. They steal because they cannot win a direct confrontation, he explained, opening a matte black refrigerator. The weapon they procured tonight. It levels the playing field. It is a poison, specifically synthesized to target the genetic markers of my family. If they manage to weaponize it fully, they could eradicate us without ever having to face us in the open. He retrieved a glass pitcher of water and poured a measure into an electric kettle. The mundane domestic action was entirely at odds with the terrifying scope of the gang war he was describing. And I saw them take it, Luna realized, a fresh wave of cold dread washing over her. She pressed her palms into her eyes. That man they shoved into the car, he must have been the one who brought it into the city. Precisely, David said. He prepared 2 mugs, his large, scarred hands moving with surprising delicacy. Which is why you cannot return to your apartment. Silver Creek operates through intimidation and surveillance. They will canvass the neighborhood. They will check the transit cameras. If they identify you, they will use you to get to me, or simply eliminate you to ensure your silence. I have shifts, she protested weakly, dropping her hands to her lap. I have rent. If I don't show up at the diner, I'll be fired. I can't just vanish into a basement, David. I have a life. A life that is currently in severe jeopardy, he reminded her, bringing a steaming mug of tea to the coffee table. He set it down gently in front of her. The scent of chamomile and a hint of wild honey drifted upward. Drink. It will soothe your nerves and help the salve work on your ribs. Luna stared at the tea, then up at him. How long? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. How long do I have to stay down here? David sat heavily on the opposite end of the leather sectional, resting his forearms on his knees. The space between them felt both vast and intimately small. Until I retrieve the crates and dismantle Silver Creek's operation entirely, he said, his tone absolute. It may take a day, it may take a week, but I swear to you, upon my honor, that you will not lose your livelihood because of my war. I will compensate you for your lost wages. I don't want your money, Luna replied quickly, a flare of pride cutting through her fear. I just want my ordinary, boring life back. David's gaze softened. He looked at her with an ancient, heavy sorrow that made Luna's breath catch. I know, he murmured. But I fear that the moment you walked through my door, your ordinary life ended. I am deeply sorry for that, Luna. The sincerity in his apology was profoundly disarming. Luna picked up the mug, letting the heat seep into her chilled fingers. She took a sip. It was perfect. She looked across the sofa at the man who claimed to rule the city's shadows, realizing with a sudden, terrifying clarity that she felt safer here, locked in a subterranean vault with a stranger, than she ever had in her own home. Time lost its meaning in the underground sanctuary. Without windows to track the sun, Luna relied on the digital clock glowing discreetly on the kitchen oven. It had been 4 hours since her shower. The herbal salve David had provided was miraculous. The sharp, agonizing bite in her ribs had dulled to a deep, manageable ache. David had spent the last several hours seated at his mahogany desk in the corner of the room, speaking in low, clipped tones into an encrypted satellite phone. He spoke a language Luna couldn't identify, something harsh, guttural, and undeniably ancient. It sounded like the grinding of tectonic plates. Exhaustion finally overtook her adrenaline. She curled up on the massive leather sectional, pulling the soft cashmere throw David had draped over her up to her chin. The deep, rhythmic cadence of his voice in the background acted as a strange lullaby, and she drifted into a heavy, dreamless sleep. She awoke to silence. The low hum of David's voice was gone. Luna sat up, wincing slightly as her bruised ribs protested the movement. The artificial lighting in the room had dimmed to a soft twilight blue. She rubbed her eyes, looking toward the mahogany desk. It was empty. Panic, sharp and immediate, flared in her chest. Had he left? Was she locked down here alone? She stood up, the oversized robe pooling around her ankles, and walked toward the center of the room. "David?" She called out softly, her voice swallowed by the vast, heavily insulated space. "I am here." She spun around. He stepped out from the shadowy alcove near the heavy steel door. He had changed his clothes. The crisp white shirt and slacks were gone, replaced by a tactical, long-sleeved black Henley and dark cargo pants. The fitted black shirt clung tightly to his heavily muscled torso, emphasizing the sheer, intimidating breadth of his shoulders. He looked less like a wealthy businessman and more like a special operations soldier preparing for a night raid. "Did I wake you?" he asked, stepping into the dim light. His footsteps were completely silent on the hardwood floor. "No," Luna said, her heart hammering a little faster at the sight of him. "Is something wrong?" David crossed the room, stopping at a section of the blank wall beside the bookshelves. He pressed his hand against the drywall. A sleek, black panel slid silently upward, revealing a bank of high-definition security monitors. Luna gasped, taking a step closer. The screens displayed various black and white feeds of the alleyway, the street corner, and the abandoned tavern directly above them. The tavern was no longer abandoned. On the central monitor, half a dozen men were moving through the dusty, debris-filled room where Luna had first encountered David. They were heavily armed, carrying sleek, military-grade rifles. They were kicking over overturned tables and systematically tearing the old oak floorboards up with crowbars. "Silver Creek," David stated, his voice a lethal, vibrating baritone. "They tracked your scent." Luna felt the blood drain from her face. "My scent?" It was pouring rain. How could they? "They have tools." David interrupted smoothly, though his eyes never left the monitors. The amber in his irises seemed to glow in the darkness of the room, predatory and terrifying. "And they are desperate. They know I operate in this sector, and they believe you ran to me for protection. They're tearing the floor apart," Luna whispered, watching a burly man on the screen smash the mahogany desk David had been leaning against hours ago. "Will they find the stairwell?" "Eventually," David replied. He turned to face her, his expression utterly devoid of warmth. The polite, civilized man who had made her tea was gone. In his place stood an apex predator. The door at the top of the stairs is reinforced steel, but with enough explosives, they will breach it. I cannot allow them to reach this level. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. David walked toward the heavy steel door that led out of the bunker. "I'm going to remind them why this territory does not belong to them." Luna rushed forward, instinctively grabbing his forearm. His muscles were corded like steel beneath the black fabric. "You can't go up there alone. There are 6 of them, and they have guns." David looked down at her small hand gripping his arm. The intense, lethal fury in his eyes softened for a fraction of a second. He gently reached over and covered her hand with his own. His skin was burning hot. "Bullets. David said, his voice dropping to a low, comforting rumble, "are a concern for ordinary men, Luna. I am going up the stairs. The door will lock behind me. You will not open it, no matter what you hear. Do you understand? David, please," she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. The thought of this man, the only person who had offered her safety, walking into a firing squad, was unbearable. "Do you understand?" he repeated, his tone firm, demanding obedience for her own safety. Luna swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes." He released her hand and pressed his palm against the biometric scanner. The heavy steel door hissed open. He stepped through, glancing back over his shoulder one last time. "Lock the door, Luna," he commanded softly. He stepped into the corridor, and the door hissed shut behind him, the heavy deadbolt sliding into place with a definitive, echoing clank. Left alone in the bunker, Luna turned back to the monitors, her heart pounding against her bruised ribs as she watched the armed men above, waiting for the slaughter to begin. The monitors flickered, casting a pale, clinical light across Luna's terrified face. The bunker was entirely silent, the heavy soundproofing isolating her from the world above, which only made the visual feed more harrowing. She gripped the edge of the mahogany desk, her knuckles white, her breath trapped in her throat. On the central screen, the 6 heavily armed men of Silver Creek were moving with grim purpose. 2 of them were kneeling by the area where the floorboards had been torn away, unpacking blocks of what looked horrifyingly like C4 plastic explosives. They were going to blow the stairwell. Then, the heavy steel door at the back of the ruined tavern swung open. Because the feed lacked audio, the scene played out like a macabre, silent film. The men spun around, their military-grade rifles snapping up to their shoulders. Luna braced herself, a scream building in her chest, expecting to see David step into a hail of bullets. But David did not step into the room. He flowed into it. The security camera, despite its high-definition frame rate, seemed incapable of tracking him perfectly. He moved with a speed that shattered the boundaries of human physics. He didn't dive for cover. He moved directly into the line of fire, a blur of tactical black fabric and terrifying intent. A brilliant white muzzle flash blew out the exposure of the camera for a fraction of a second. When the lens auto-corrected, the man who had fired was already airborne, hurled backward with such immense, concussive force that he shattered one of the tavern's rotting load-bearing pillars upon impact. Luna gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. Her logical mind, honed by years of surviving the harsh realities of the city, screamed in protest. A man of David's size could certainly hit hard, but throwing a fully grown, armor-clad enforcer 15 feet through the air was a biological impossibility. The remaining 5 men panicked. The calculated discipline of their tactical sweep evaporated into pure chaos. They fired wildly, the continuous muzzle flashes creating a strobe light effect on the monitor. Yet, David was never where the bullets struck. He used the deep shadows of the ruined tavern, slipping between the men with predatory grace. He disarmed the second man with a brutal, twisting motion, dismantling the assault rifle with his bare hands before driving his elbow into the man's chest plate. The man dropped instantly, incapacitated. "My God," Luna whispered, the sound deafening in the quiet bunker. He wasn't fighting like a trained soldier. He was fighting like an apex predator that had been cornered in its den. There was no wasted movement, no flashy martial arts. It was simply the absolute terrifying application of overwhelming force. Suddenly, a 7th man, one who had been hiding in the blind spot near the shattered windows, stepped into the frame. He raised a heavy, silver-plated shotgun, aiming it squarely at David's back while David was engaged with the leader. "Behind you!" Luna screamed at the monitor, slamming her hands against the glass panel, completely forgetting that he couldn't hear her. The man fired. The impact of the heavy slug caught David perfectly in the right shoulder. The sheer kinetic force of the blast drove him forward, forcing him down to one knee. Luna's heart stopped. A cold, suffocating void opened in her chest. She pressed her forehead against the screen, tears spilling hot and fast down her cheeks. "He's dead," her mind chanted. "You killed him. You brought them here." But the man on the screen didn't stay down. Slowly, deliberately, David stood up. The back of his black Henley was shredded, dark blood already soaking the fabric, but his posture was completely unbroken. He turned his head slowly to look at the man who had shot him. Even through the grainy black and white feed, Luna could see the unnatural, luminous glow of his amber eyes. They pierced through the darkness of the tavern like twin lanterns. The shooter dropped the shotgun, stumbling backward in absolute terror. He turned and bolted for the shattered window, choosing the two-story drop to the alleyway over facing the monster he had just shot. David didn't pursue him. He turned his attention back to the remaining Silver Creek men. Within 60 seconds, the tavern was still. 5 men lay unconscious or incapacitated on the floorboards. David stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving slightly. He looked directly up at the security camera. For a moment, the vast, impenetrable distance between the surface and the bunker vanished. He was looking right at her. He gave a single curt nod, then turned and walked back toward the hidden stairwell. Luna stumbled backward from the monitors, her knees trembling so violently she could barely stand. She wiped the tears from her face, staring at the heavy steel door of the bunker. He was alive. But as the logical gears of her mind began to turn, a new, profound terror set in. No ordinary man could have survived that. No ordinary man could have done what she just witnessed. The biometric scanner chimed. A soft, pleasant sound that felt entirely out of place following the brutal slaughter Luna had just witnessed. The heavy steel bolt slid back with a clank, and the pneumatic hinges hissed, swinging the door inward. David stepped over the threshold. The pristine, unruffled gentleman who had poured her tea hours ago was completely gone. He smelled powerfully of cordite, pulverized plaster, and the heavy metallic tang of blood. His black shirt was torn wide open at the right shoulder, the fabric plastered to his skin. He turned and pressed his palm to the scanner again. The door sealed shut, locking them in. Luna stood frozen by the leather sectional. The oversized charcoal robe clutched tightly around her bruised ribs. She wanted to run to him, but her feet felt cemented to the floor. The sheer, overwhelming aura of danger radiating from him was palpable, a physical pressure in the room. "I apologize for the delay," David said. His voice was incredibly calm, a low, smooth baritone that betrayed absolutely no pain or exertion. "I had to ensure the alleyway was clear before returning." "You were shot," Luna breathed, finally finding her voice. She pointed a trembling finger at his shoulder. "I saw it on the monitors. You took a shotgun blast to the back." David glanced down at his shoulder as if he had merely spilled wine on his shirt. "It is a flesh wound. The slug did not penetrate the bone. A minor inconvenience." "A minor inconvenience?" Luna echoed, her voice pitching up in a mixture of hysteria and disbelief. "David, people don't just walk off a shotgun blast at close range. You need an ambulance. You need a hospital." She rushed past him toward the bathroom, her bare feet slapping against the hardwood. She returned seconds later with a heavy medical kit he had used on her ribs. She set it on the coffee table, her hands shaking so badly she could barely pop the latches. "Sit down," she ordered, surprising herself with the authority in her tone. David looked at her, the feral glow in his amber eyes softening slightly. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. He walked over to the sectional and sat heavily, resting his forearms on his knees. "You are a remarkably resilient woman, Luna," he murmured as she stepped up beside him. "I'm a realist," she shot back, grabbing a pair of heavy trauma shears from the kit. "Hold still, I have to cut the shirt." He didn't flinch as she carefully slid the shears beneath the ruined fabric, cutting away the collar and sleeve to expose the wound. Luna braced herself for the gruesome sight, her stomach churning. She peeled the blood-soaked fabric back, and her breath hitched. There was a wound, certainly. A ragged, ugly tear in the heavily muscled flesh of his shoulder. But it wasn't bleeding. The dark, crimson blood that stained his skin was already drying. Beneath the surface, the torn tissue seemed to be shifting, knitting together at a microscopic yet visible pace. It looked like time-lapse photography of a healing injury. Luna dropped the shears. They clattered loudly against the glass coffee table. "That's..." She took a step back, her logical mind hitting a brick wall and shattering. "That is not physically possible. Your cells are... They're closing the wound." David remained seated, his posture relaxed. He did not try to hide the injury or make excuses. He looked up at her, the ancient, heavy sorrow returning to his gaze. "I told you, Luna," he said quietly, the polite cadence of his voice contrasting sharply with the terrifying reality of his biology. "The lineage I belong to, we are not ordinary men. My family has ruled the shadows of this city for centuries because we are uniquely equipped to survive it." "What are you?" she whispered, her back pressing against the edge of the mahogany desk. The fear was different now. It wasn't the frantic panic of the alleyway. It was a deep, existential dread. David stood up slowly. Despite the violence he had just committed, his movements were gentle, completely non-threatening. "I am the man who offered you sanctuary," he answered softly. "And I am a man who keeps his word." He walked past her toward the wall of monitors. He tapped a command into the keyboard. The screen shifted from the ruined tavern to a digitized map of the city. A solitary red dot was blinking steadily near the industrial district. "The men upstairs managed to send a distress beacon before I neutralized their communications," David explained, his tone shifting back to the calculating, pragmatic leader. "Silver Creek will send reinforcements. This bunker is fortified, but they have explosives. They will eventually dig us out." "So we have to leave?" Luna asked, trying to force her brain to focus on survival rather than the biological impossibility standing in front of her. "I have to leave," David corrected. He turned to face her. "The red dot is the tracker embedded in the crates they stole. They are moving it to a secondary facility. I must intercept it tonight before they manage to weaponize the contents." He walked over to a heavy wall safe hidden behind a framed landscape painting. He opened it, retrieving a thick envelope and a set of keys. He walked back to Luna and held them out to her. "In the garage connected to the lower tunnels, there is a sedan," he instructed. "This envelope contains enough cash to settle your rent for a year, and the deed to a small, secure property in the neighboring state. You can drive away tonight, Luna. You can have a quiet, ordinary life, far away from my war." Luna stared at the envelope. It was exactly what she had begged for hours ago. An out. A chance to vanish. She looked up from the money, meeting his glowing, amber eyes. She thought of the men who had hunted her in the rain, She thought of the terrifying, undeniable power David possessed, and the gentle, respectful way he had treated her despite it. He was a monster to his enemies, but to her, he had been an absolute shield. "If I leave," Luna said slowly, her voice steadying, "who is going to patch your bullet holes while you're busy saving your city?" David's hand slowly lowered. The stoic, unreadable mask he wore slipped, revealing a flash of profound, genuine surprise. He stared at her, the silence stretching between them, thick with an unspoken, undeniable tension. "You are choosing chaos, little bird," he warned, his voice a low rumble. "I'm choosing the logic of predators," Luna replied, stepping away from the desk and leaving the envelope untouched. "And you're the biggest one in the room." The heavy steel door hissed shut, sealing David's exit and plunging the subterranean sanctuary back into absolute silence. Luna stood by the mahogany desk, the envelope of cash and the deed to a safe life resting untouched beside her hand. She stared at the bank of monitors. The red dot on the digital map, representing the stolen weapon, was moving steadily toward the industrial district. She could have left. The lowered tunnels David mentioned were surely clear by now. But as her logical mind dissected the situation, the math of her survival had shifted. David was an apex predator, a biological anomaly capable of surviving shotgun blasts at close range. Yet, he was walking into a trap designed specifically to kill his kind. If he fell tonight, Silver Creek would consume the city. They would eventually find her, deed or no deed. Action dictates survival, Luna whispered to herself, a mantra she had used to get through double shifts and lean winters. She turned away from the monitors and went to work. If David returned, he would not be walking in unscathed. She moved swiftly through the bunker, gathering every clean towel she could find from the luxurious bathroom. She retrieved the heavy trauma kit, laying out the shears, bandages, and the jars of herbal salve on the glass coffee table with the meticulous organization of a surgical nurse. Finally, she filled 2 pitchers with clean water and set them nearby. Then, she sat on the edge of the leather sectional and watched the monitors. The wait was agonizing. The digital clock on the oven ticked past midnight, then 1 in the morning, then 2. On the map, the red dot had stopped moving, settling deep within an abandoned rail yard at the city's edge. There were no camera feeds there, only the steady, mocking blink of the tracker. At 3:14 a.m., the biometric scanner outside the bunker chimed. Luna was on her feet before the pneumatic hinges even began to hiss. The heavy steel door swung inward, and her breath caught in her throat. David did not stride into the room with his usual terrifying grace. He staggered. In his left hand, he carried a heavy, lead-lined metallic cylinder, roughly the size of a fire extinguisher. His right arm hung uselessly at his side. The tactical black Henley was soaked through, sticking to his heavily muscled torso, but it wasn't just blood. It was a strange, viscous black fluid that seemed to smoke faintly in the ambient air. He managed 2 steps into the room before his knees buckled. "David!" Luna screamed, abandoning all hesitation. She sprinted across the hardwood floor, catching his good arm just as he pitched forward. The sheer weight of him nearly dragged her down, but she braced her legs, hauling him upright with every ounce of strength she possessed. "The cylinder," David gasped, his voice a ragged, wet rasp completely stripped of its usual smooth authority. "Do not touch it. It is sealed. But the residue, I've got you. Just keep moving." She grunted, wrapping her arm around his waist and pulling him toward the leather sectional. His skin, usually radiating a comforting heat, was ice cold and clammy. She managed to ease him onto the sofa. He dropped the metal cylinder heavily onto the rug, out of the way. His amber eyes, usually so piercing and dominant, were clouded and unfocused. Black veins spider-webbed up the side of his neck, pulsing erratically. The weapon, Luna realized, panic finally threatening to shatter her composure. They hit you with it. A glancing blow? David managed, a weak, polite smile touching his pale lips. Even now, he was trying to reassure her. A particulate grenade. The compound. It inhibits cellular regeneration. It is freezing my blood. How do I fix it? Luna demanded, dropping to her knees beside the coffee table and ripping open the trauma kit. Tell me what to do. The salve? No, he whispered, his head lolling back against the leather. Bottom drawer of the desk, a wooden box. Vials of charcoal-colored liquid. Luna scrambled to the desk, tearing the bottom drawer open. She found the polished wooden box, flipped the latch, and retrieved a thick glass vial filled with a dark, heavy liquid. She ran back, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Drink it? She asked. David gave a tight, agonizing shake of his head. Injected, directly into the wound. The syringe is in the box. Luna's stomach flipped, but her hands moved on autopilot. She retrieved the heavy steel syringe, loaded the dark liquid, and turned back to him. She cut away the remaining fabric of his shirt. His side was a mangled mess of torn tissue, completely blackened by the poison, and it wasn't healing. Hold still, she ordered, her voice cracking. She plunged the needle directly into the center of the blackened flesh and depressed the plunger. David let out a low, guttural roar that vibrated through the floorboards. A sound so purely animalistic, it made the hairs on Luna's arms stand up. His massive frame went rigid, his hands gripping the edge of the sofa so hard the leather tore. Then he collapsed backward, entirely still. David, Luna whispered, dropping the syringe. She pressed her fingers to his neck, directly over the black veins. His pulse was faint, thready, but it was there. And slowly, miraculously, the black veins began to recede, fading back into his skin. When Luna finally opened her eyes, the artificial lighting in the bunker had shifted to a warm, morning gold. She was sitting on the floor, her head resting against the edge of the leather sofa cushion, her fingers still resting lightly on David's wrist to monitor his pulse. She blinked, wincing as her stiff neck protested. The bunker was quiet, save for the soft crackle of the ceramic fireplace. You did not take the money. The voice was low, resonant, and entirely steady. Luna snapped her head up. David was sitting upright on the sofa, looking down at her. The ashen pallor was gone from his skin. The terrifying black wound on his side was completely closed, leaving behind only a pale, silvery scar that was rapidly fading. You're awake, Luna breathed, a profound wave of relief washing over her. She pulled her hand back, suddenly self-conscious. Your cells. They started working again about an hour after the injection. David looked at the medical supplies scattered across the table, the blood-soaked towels, and the empty syringe. Then, his gaze settled on Luna. She looked like a wreck, her hair a mess, dark circles under her eyes, wearing his oversized robe. But to him, she looked like an absolute revelation. The poison was designed to target the specific genetic markers of my lineage, David explained softly. It shuts down our biology, rendering us as vulnerable as ordinary men. Had you not administered the counteragent, I would not have survived the dawn. I told you, Luna said, attempting a tired smile. I'm a realist. If you died, I had no shield. David slowly reached out. He gently brushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. His touch was warm again, a comforting, heavy heat. You are deflecting, Luna. A realist would have driven out of the city the moment I left this bunker. You chose to stay. You chose to fight a war that was not yours. Luna looked down at her hands. I've spent my whole life running from monsters in this city, David. Dodging gangs, keeping my head down, trying to be invisible. When you walked out that door to protect me, it was the first time I realized I didn't want to run anymore. I wanted to stand my ground. David's amber eyes burned with an intense, ancient emotion. The polite, measured gentleman had stripped away, revealing the raw, undeniable power of the man beneath. My family has ruled the underworld of this city for 300 years, David said, his voice a vibrating, hypnotic rumble. We are the apex. We are the alphas of this concrete jungle. I have commanded hundreds of men, faced down cartels and syndicates. But I have never encountered a spirit as quietly terrifying as yours. Luna looked up, her breath catching at the proximity. Terrifying? You possess a mortal fragility, yet you commanded a predator to sit, and you stitched him back together while his enemies hunted him. David murmured, a small, genuine smile gracing his lips. That is true power, Luna. He shifted, leaning closer. The feral, intoxicating scent of pine and ozone surrounded her, making her heart hammer a frantic rhythm against her bruised but healing ribs. Silver Creek's leadership was eradicated last night. David continued, his gaze dropping momentarily to her lips before meeting her eyes again. The weapon is secured. The threat to you is over. You are free to return to the surface. Luna searched his face, reading the tension in his jaw, the unspoken question hovering in the heavy air between them. He was giving her a choice, fully respecting her autonomy, even though she could see the fierce, undeniable possessiveness burning in his amber eyes. What if I don't want an ordinary, boring life anymore? She asked softly. David's breath hitched. His massive hand gently cupped her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. Then you will never have to hide in the rain again, little bird, he promised, his voice dropping to a harsh, beautiful whisper. My sanctuary is yours. My city is yours. He leaned in, the space between them vanishing. His lips brushed hers, a touch that was startlingly gentle for a man of such overwhelming violence. It was a promise, a binding contract forged in the shadows of the underground. Luna closed her eyes, leaning into the heat of him, finally feeling, for the very first time in her life, completely and utterly safe. The world above may have been defined by chaos, sirens, and the cold reality of the concrete streets. But beneath it all, a new order had been solidified. Luna had stumbled into a hidden war seeking a momentary refuge, only to discover that true sanctuary wasn't just a place. It was a partnership forged in fire, logic, and profound courage. She had faced the darkest, most dangerous elements of the city, and tamed the Alpha King who ruled them. Thank you for reading Can I Hide Here? They're coming, I pleaded, unaware the man inside was the Alpha King. If you enjoyed this blend of grounded suspense, cinematic drama, and slow-burn romance, please hit the like button, share the story with fellow fiction lovers, and subscribe for more thrilling, character-driven serials.